everyone, welcome to Jolly Molly TV. Ready for another fun block in Kimberbell's Candy Corn Quilt Shop Quilt? Okay, so today let's just get started on this. We're going to work on this one right here. I call it Here Lies an Unfinished Quilt. May it rest in pieces. That's going to be a cute block. So go ahead and get your plastic bag or your pouch system that has the label on it for this quilt, May It Rest in Pieces, and take it over to the machine. I'll meet you over there and let's get started. Okay, we are at the machine and ready to get started. So just for reference, I have a Embroidery machine so you can kind of see where I'm going on the screen. We're going to add the designs first before we start stitching. So I'm going to go to my flash drive. I'm going to go to my candy corn folder, and we're going to load the quilting designs first. Now, we are on pages 12 and 13 of the Kimberbell instruction booklet, and today we're going to do the last Tombstone block, which is called Here Lies an Unfinished Quilt. May it rest in pieces. That's so cute. So we're going to go ahead and look at the top of page 13, and we want to look at the squared finished block size, which is 4.5 to 6.5. That's going to tell me that I need to select the 4x6 design, because you want to make sure, again, the quilting design is just a smidgen smaller than the actual finished square block. So you look at your finished block. If it says 4.5 by 6.5 with seam allowances, we want to choose the 4x6 design to bring in. So there's my quilting design. We're going to click Set. Brings it all in. We're good. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the applique design on top of that. So I'm going to go back to my flash drive, go to candy corn, go to my main quilt, and I am looking for the May It Rest in Pieces design, which is right here. Click on that and bring that in. That looks great. Click Set. Now you may have a machine that doesn't allow you to add the designs one on top of each other. That's okay. What you're going to do is bring in the quilting design first. You're going to stitch that out. Then you're going to clear the machine. And then you're going to bring in the May It Rest in Pieces design and just stitch that separately. You don't have to add it on top of one another. It just makes it a little bit faster than having to go back and forth, but you can definitely do it one at a time, no problem. Okay, everything looks good. Let's click on Embroidery. All right, and we are ready to start stitching out the first step, which is going to be the placement line for the batting. So let's look at the machine here. I have a 5x7 hoop filled with a piece of the poly no-show mesh stabilizer. I have bobbin thread, enough I believe, in the bottom of my hoop. And I'm going to go ahead and put this in. Now normally, like I said on my other videos, I use the 8x8 hoop just for demonstration purposes because it's easier to see. But I'm going to use the 5x7 because that's what most of you may have out there. And the fabric will just lap over the sides a little bit, and I'll show you that when we get there. But it will work with the 5x7 hoop, no problem, because the design is 4.5 by 6.5. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the fabric and what thread I'm going to use at this stage. The fabric for this design, if you're using the kit, is this really cool purple with all these cute sayings like candy corn, Bella's Boutique, Dead, and Breakfast Inn. It's really cute. So this is the fabric that came with the kit. Because it's a purple fabric, so I have this really cool purple thread that I'm going to put in the top of my machine. Now the first stitches that we're going to do, the placement line for the batting, we're going to tack the batting down, and then we're going to do placement line for this fabric, and we're going to tack this fabric down and then quilt it. All of that can be done using this purple thread. All the stitches we're going to do behind the scenes are never going to be seen. So it doesn't matter what color it is. And if I put purple in now, it'll actually save me from swapping out the thread a couple times. So let's put purple thread in the top of the machine. Okay, and another little trick, in case you haven't seen my other videos. When you put your thread in your top of your machine, and after you thread the needle, it comes out with this little loop. Take your stylus and get rid of that loop. That loop has a tendency, if left alone, to get wrapped around this foot and the needle, and it will break your needle in a second. So whenever I see that loop, I just come out here, flip it out, and prevent that from happening. Ask me how I know. It's happened to me a couple times. So I learned that lesson. Get rid of that loop. Do not let it sit there. Okay? So now let's put your foot down and let's stitch out the placement line for the batting. Okay, so now I'm going to lay the batting down and make sure I cover that stitch lines. And I'm using a scrap of batting from another project. So mine's a little bit bigger than it needs to be, but that's okay. I'm going to make sure I cover both sides. Put the foot down, either tape the batting in place or do what I do, but keep your fingers away from the moving needle. And let's tack down this batting. Okay, so let's take this over to the table and let's trim away all this excess batting. Okay, we're back at the machine. The hoop is back on and the batting is all trimmed up nicely. So let's go ahead with the purple thread still in the top of the machine. Let's put the foot down and stitch out the placement line for the fabric. Perfect. Now let's lay the fabric down. And we're just going to kind of line it up, make sure that we have plenty on the top and the bottom. The fabric will come over on the edges of the hoop, but that's okay. As long as you cover all the sides and kind of center it roughly, you're going to be fine, because this stitch line it's going to stitch right now is where we're going to trim it up. So we have extra fabric, so you don't have to worry about it being perfectly centered. Just lay it down and make sure that you are covering that placement line. Either tape it down or hold it down like I do. Keep your fingers away and let's tack down the fabric. So you really don't have to worry about it being perfectly centered, because we have all this extra fabric around all the sides, and this block is going to get trimmed up to be this stitch line here. So you have no problem. You don't have to worry about getting it perfectly centered. You're good. Okay, so now the next step to stitch out is my favorite. It's the quilting designs. So let's sit back and relax. This in real time takes about 4 minutes. Let's quilt this block. Purple thread still on top. That is so pretty. I love that. So the next step that we're going to stitch out is the placement line for the tombstone. So because the next step is going to involve gray fabric after that, I want to put a silver thread in the top of my machine now for the placement line, and then we'll already have it in place for the tack down stitch. So let's put silver thread in the top of the machine. Okay, silver thread's on top. Let's put the foot down and let's stitch out the placement line for the tombstone. That was fairly easy. So now I'm going to go ahead and take the hoop off for just a minute to make it a little bit easier to position this because it was way up there. So I'm going to make sure I line it up, make sure it's covered on all sides. And right there. And then I'm going to put the hoop back in. I do that once in a while when it's too far up for me to see. So then I'm going to use my stylus to help keep the fabric down, and let's go ahead and tack down this fabric. That's looking good. So the next step it wants us to do in the instructions is to not cut the fabric, even though that's our typical next step, is we always go over to the table and cut this off. It would like us to stitch out the inscription first before we trim this up. So we will do as instructed, and let's put black thread in the top of the machine, and let's stitch out this phrase, "Here lies an unfinished quilt, may it rest in pieces." Okay, black thread on top of the machine, and let's stitch it out. This takes about 10 minutes in real time. Doesn't that look cute? Oh, I love it. We got a few jump stitches that we're going to trim out, but let's take this over to the table, and now we can trim away the excess fabric. we are back at the machine. Everything's all trimmed up, ready to go. But I noticed that my bobbin thread is a little low. And I know that that is not going to be enough to do satin stitches all around the outside of this. So I'm going to go ahead and replace it now with a new bobbin. So then that way we will not run out during the middle of stitching out the satin stitches. Why is that important? Well, once you get going with the satin stitches and you run out of bobbin thread, you're literally going to have to back yourself up on the machine and then restart the stitches at the point where it can get a kind of a running start and then continue on. So it's easier if we can avoid that issue by just putting in a new bobbin. And we'll use the little straggler part here later. And if not, it's not that much to waste, even though I hate wasting it. But I can use this one for like a tack down stitch or something on another block and use up that bobbin thread. This way we are all ready to stitch out a long series of satin stitches, because I believe this is, that's about 14 minutes stitch out. So now we'll be ready to go. So I'm going to put a silver thread in the top of the machine so that we can stitch out these satin stitches. It'll match the other Tombstone blocks with the silver on the outside edge. Okay, we got silver thread up on top. Now let's put the foot down. We'll fast forward through this 14 minutes of stitch out and let's stitch out the satin stitches. We're almost done. I love that song. Look at that. That is so cute. Good job, everybody. All right, let's take this over to the table and let's finish up this block. Isn't that adorable? I love the way the satin stitches just finish that off so nicely. All right, well, let's go ahead and take the block out of the hoop and put this aside. Okay, now you have two options. Isn't this exciting? One, if you have the Kimberbell Orange Pop rulers, you're going to be looking for the cut size that's 4.5 by 6.5 inch, because that will help you square up this block. I'm also going to demo how to do it with a regular ruler. And what we're looking for is, you see this stitch line on the sides? That's what we're going to use to trim up this block. So first, if you're using the Kimberbell Orange Pop ruler, you're just literally going to line it up so the stitch line is just inside the ruler. And then you're going to use your rotary cutter and hopefully a rotating cutting mat to do this. If you like a demo of this, go ahead and look at videos 4 and 5 in this series where I show you how to do this. But using that rotating cutting mat makes this real easy. But on this block, I want to show you how to use a regular ruler to cut this to size. The first one's really easy, okay? All you're looking for is to put your ruler just to the left of the left stitch line. Okay, so let's start on the left side. You want to be on the outside edge, but I want to be able to see that thread. So I just want to be a smidgen to the left side of that thread, and we're just going to trim this up nice and slow. Hold your ruler down, trim it nice and easy. Okay, and it didn't catch there. I do need a new blade, but this one's still going for a while, so we'll just make do. Now, this block is going to be 4.5 inches wide by 6.5 inches tall. So 4.5 across. So I want to do two things. I want to measure 4.5 over on the mat, and I use my fingers to count 1, 2, 3, 4.5, which will put it at the 13.5 mark. All right, let's do it. 1, 2, 3, 4.5. That's on the mat. Then I want to check the ruler, because the ruler, I can line the ruler up with the edge of the block at this half mark, and it would be 1, 2, 3, 4.5. And because these rulers are see-through, I can see that the stitch line, the purple stitch line, is literally just inside the edge of that ruler. That's exactly where I want to be. So 4.5 inches, and I'm going to put my hand down, keep the ruler from moving, and I'm going to cut. Okay. Again, I'm going to trim up this just a smidge. There we go. Always try to close your rotary cutter. All right, so now if I look, 1, 2, 3, 4.5. That is the perfect width for the block. We're going to do the same thing for this direction. This direction is going to be 6.5 inches from the stitch line outside to the outside of the stitch line. So the first one, we don't really even have to measure. I am just going to go to the thread line, that stitch line, and go just a smidgy on the outside of it. Make sure I'm straight. And trim it up. Okay. Now we'll measure, because I want this to be 6.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oops, it moved. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5. The finger thing that people think is weird, but to me it's my mental note of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5. That way I've double checked, and my mind, I know I'm spot on, even though I can do the math. It's just kind of a little security for me to go, yes, I am definitely in the right spot. And let's move the ruler this way, because I can also do the same thing we did with the ruler in this direction. So I'm going to line up this edge of the purple block with the half mark, and then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5. So we are good. And again, there's that stitch mark, that stitch line, just inside the clear ruler. So I am where I want to be, and I can go ahead and slowly trim that up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5. We're spot on. And again, you see the stitch line is just on the inside of where I cut. So you have your perfectly trimmed block with a regular ruler. Isn't that awesome? I love it. Okay, so we have that tombstone block. And now I just want to add it to the family of blocks that we have already done, so you guys can see how far you have come. Look at that. That is going to be the cutest project ever. Everybody loving it? I hope you had fun today working on that block. Now you've got the 3 tombstones done and the 3 embroidery hoops done. So please come back and watch the next video here on Jolly Molly TV. Please subscribe to my channel. That is the one thing that you can do, and it's free. that will help me do what I do for you. If you can just hit that subscribe button and then click on the bell notifications as well, because that way you'll be notified after you subscribe of every video that I put out on this project and others. And reminder, subscriptions are free. Doesn't cost you anything to subscribe to my channel. Then you'll be able to see on your phone or your iPad or your computer when I upload videos. And you can see all my video series on there as well. Even some of the quilt show videos that I've done in the past. Can't wait for quilt shows to come back. One day soon. We'll get there. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned, and I hope to see you here again on Jolly Molly TV. So until then, take care. Bye-bye.